Good morning, everybody. I hope you can all see us. We waited a couple of minutes to get started as we've still got some attendees arriving, but I think we don't want to wait any longer because those of you that are here, I think would like to have a webinar. So my name is Bonnie Fenton, and I work at Ruprecht Consult in Cologne, Germany, and I will be moderating today's session, which is, as you can see on your screen, I think, how to improve the efficiency of the transport system in urban nodes of the 10T core network. So welcome to our session today. It's taking place on Thursday, the 8th of December, 2016. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, Central European time. And it happens to be a lovely day here in Cologne, Germany, where we're sitting. For your information, this webinar is also being recorded, so it'll be available to other people in the future, just so you know. It doesn't have any effect on what's happening, just to make you aware of that. And I would like to start by giving you a few tips on what you need to know with regard to participation in the webinar itself. And the first thing is with regard to your phone or internet connection. If you're working over your computer through the internet, that's completely fine. There are no issues. If you did dial in by telephone, it's important also to add the audio PIN code. It doesn't make any difference in your hearing us, but it means that you were able to participate orally. So if you have put your audio PIN in, then we can unmute you so that you're able to participate in the conversation. Otherwise, you're only on hearing mode without speaking. So that's the first point you need to know. The next thing is dial in, this is it, yes, I've just told you that, the dial in options. Your phone number should be there. It's not the number on the screen, this is just for demonstration, but you should have the phone number you'll see on the side of your screen to dial into to put your PIN access into. The participation tools that are available to you in a webinar, perhaps some of you have participated in webinars, but if you haven't, these are some of the things you need to know. The mute button is, I can show you, just a minute, is right here. And everybody is muted at the moment. And this is because we have 30 people or 32 people registered for today's webinar. So far we've got about 12 people, and I think there'll be more people arriving as we go along. So we've kept everybody muted so there's not a lot of background noise, otherwise it would be quite busy, and so we've taken that out. The next thing you need to know is, I have to get rid of my pen first. Okay. The next thing is, the raising your hand function, which you should see on the right side of your screen, and that allows you to, two things. If we ask you questions and we would like a yes/no answer, we can ask you to push the raise your hand button. It's also the way that you can communicate with us to let us know that you'd like to say something. So as I said, you're muted from the beginning. If you raise your hand, though, we can unmute you so that you can speak. And the next thing we'd like to show you is the question function, which is again on the right side of your screen. And you can do this at any time throughout, is write a question down, and we can respond to it either immediately in writing or at an appropriate time during the presentation. So feel free to use the question function anytime you like throughout the presentations. And the last thing is a poll function. So we'll be asking a few poll questions throughout, and we just ask you then to respond. It'll be self-explanatory when we get there, but to respond to the polls so that we can get some input from you as well during the course of the presentations. So those are the basic participation tools that you need to know about. Just so you know who's here. Me, you can see I'm moderating, as I said, but we also have two colleagues that are working with us here today, and one is Hannah Peters, who is our question and poll manager. So when you write your questions, she'll be taking those and bringing them to the attention of the presenters during the webinar. And behind the camera, we have our colleague Lasse Brandt, who is our technology manager for today, and making sure that everything runs the way that it's supposed to. And that's who we are. And we would like to start now to find out something about who you are. And to that end, we have our first poll question. And I think Hannah's going to put that up for us. Opening up. And if we could ask you just to reply to the poll question. I'll give you a couple of seconds for that. Hannah, you can see if the answers are coming in.
Yeah, the answers are coming in. We'll wait a few more seconds.
Okay.
Still waiting. Cast your vote, please, if you haven't yet. All right, I'll close it. So now we can see that everybody who's here at the moment is working for an urban node.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's from one of the cities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure what we would have, so that's good information to have. As I said, we're not up to our full contingent, but I can see that we've got more and more people arriving every minute, so that may change as we go, but at least all the people that arrive punctually are from the cities, so I'm not sure if there's a message in that or not. Okay, so that's something about who is here, what to expect today. Welcome and introductions, we've just had that. Participation tools, we've just seen those. So we'll get to the main part, or the reason that you're here today is the two presentations we'll be seeing. The first one, how to improve the efficiency of the transport system in urban nodes of the 10T core network. So this is basically the title of our webinar. And the second one is the assessment of transport policy measures. So looking at how it's actually done and the methodology used within this project. So the people that you will see making these presentations are, first of all, my colleague, Dr. Susanna Bula-Bedecker, who is sitting next to me, and she is the coordinator of the study that we'll be looking at today. And coming after Susanna is Jan Kiel, who is a senior expert from Pantea. And within the Urban Nodes project, Pantea has collected the information to set up the methodology for assessing cost-efficient measures, and they designed the methodology that was applied in the study and developed and updated the methodological tool, and have also supported the 4 case study cities that were involved in the project. So those are the two presentations that we'll have. The first will be from Susanna, who I'll pass it over to. Again, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll bring them all up at the end of each presentation and then have time for discussion when we're finished at the end as well. So Susanna, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Thank you for the introduction. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for listening. I would like to introduce you to the topic, give you some background information, and I would like also to introduce a study to you, which was carried out on behalf of DG Move, and the consortium consisted of PricewaterhouseCoopers, Pantea, and Rubich Consult. And we worked on the study in 2015 and 2016, and will soon be completed. And what I would like to share with you is also key findings, or draft key findings, also recommendations. And I think the report, which is also will be publicly available, will be available end of this year. So let's start with the background of the study, which is the 10T network, the Trans-European Network for Transport, which has been developed since decades, but since 2013 we have a new EU policy for the transport infrastructure development as the Trans-European Network. And together with the financing stream, which is the Connecting Europe facility. And with the new guidelines, there is a dual layer network approach has been defined, and we have a comprehensive and a core network. And for both networks, for both layers, different priorities have been defined for the implementation of measures, for example. And and as part of both networks, a skeleton has been nodes as a skeleton of the network have been defined, and for the main node, for the core network, 88 main nodes have been identified on the basis of statistics, and as a matter of, or according to implementation, 9 core network corridors have been defined, which you see here on the map. Coming to our focus, or the focus of the study, were the 88 urban nodes of the core network, and they have a special function in the core network. They should interconnect between the transport mode of the TEN-T for passenger and freight traffic. They should close the gap in the urban areas within the modes and within the TEN-T elements, which are the railway stations, airports, and ports. They should ensure a seamless connection between the TEN-T infrastructure, so the upper network, and the regional and the local infrastructure, both for passengers and for urban freight. But on the other hand, also the negative effects of transit traffic, which runs through the urban areas, or which runs into urban areas, should be relieved. So this is the background information and the context we have been working in. And what we have identified is special issues which are important for urban nodes, and which are we consider as important from the nodal perspective when looking on the TEN-T infrastructure development. So the question from the nodal perspective are how to align TEN-T policy, which is a large-scale infrastructure program, to urban policy, which addresses multiple objectives like accessibility, safety, or low emission and quality of life. How to bring those different perspectives and also policies together, which are separated currently. So where to invest and how to assess the benefits of an urban transport project for its nodal function, and how does this measure and project contribute to local objectives. And for according to this question, we will hear more from Jan Kiel, how to assess the benefits of projects, and how to deal with the multitude and integration needs of stakeholders and interests. If you have the task not to only to look at the local level and on measures which contribute to the local objectives, but also which should contribute to connectivity. And also how to participate in the dialogue of the corridor development and work plans, which is an activity which is carried out on the TEN-T.
Susanna, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt before you go on and even click back to the previous slide. I was looking at this in advance, and we would like to ask the participants a question in this regard, and I think Hannah's putting up the next poll. So from your perspective, and this is maybe a good question now since we know that at least most of the participants are from the cities, the question is, which of these issues, so the issues that Susanna's just named, which of them do you think is the biggest challenge from the perspective of the city or the node? So if we could get all of you just to put your answers up there. Hannah, are you following the results? Are we getting some answers here?
Yeah. About half of the participants have already cast their answer. Just give the rest a couple more seconds to consider. All right, thank you everyone who voted. Now I'll share the results, and you can see that it's the first two options were the main challenges from the perspective of the participants, how to align the TEN-T policy and urban policy, and where to invest, and how to assess the benefits of the project.
Okay. Does that align with what you would?
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everybody. Suzanne, I'll turn it back to you again.
Okay, I will continue with the objectives and outputs of our study, which was the how to identify cost-effective measures to improve the efficiency of the transport system in urban nodes, and to develop a tailor-made assessment methodology, which will be introduced in some minutes. We should draft recommendations for urban nodes, but also to EU policy on how to further improve and how to support the efficiency of transport in urban nodes. And also how to replicate effective and successful measures and projects also to other nodes, and how to facilitate exchange and knowledge transfer. What we did is we selected 4 pilot nodes of the core network, which were Geneva, Helsinki, Rotterdam, and Ljubljana, and we carried out workshops in those cities, and with different stakeholders coming from port authorities, coming from operators of the airport, but also from the local and the regional authorities. So a very interesting mixture of stakeholders which had a dialogue about their role in the TEN-T, and how to improve their nodal function. So we had, first of all, a dialogue with them about the whole topic, and we identified also local objectives and important transport policies and measures and projects. And we had an exchange about planning practices, and also about the integration of regional and national stakeholders and how to set priorities. And yes, and actually we found out that the planning practices are quite different in the cities, especially when it comes to the collaboration process of stakeholders. We carried out a data collection, especially in order to carry out the assessment of the selected transport projects. And what we did, we tested the methodology with the stakeholders. So the guiding questions for the study were, again here, what are cost-effective measures which contribute to the nodal function? What methodology should be used to identify and prioritize measures? And what policy framework is needed to support urban nodes in developing their nodal function across Europe? And I would like to share some key findings with you. First of all, one key finding is that that urban nodes, the 88 urban nodes, are very different in regard to geography, demography, governance, and planning cultures, and they are very different and are very complex systems, and therefore there's no one-size-fits-all solution, which means it's very difficult to identify 3 or 2 or maybe more efficient measures which are appropriate and efficient for all urban nodes. So we have to differentiate much more. And what we found out as well, that urban nodes do have to develop localized strategies and policies specifically in order to meet their local objectives. What are the cost-effective measures? So in reality, the 4 pilot urban nodes are considering a great collection of potentially effective measures, and cost efficiency is only one important selection criterion among the other objectives. beyond accessibility, quality of life, safety, and land use especially are very important objectives, and are raised together, and the assessment which are carried out have to address the multitude of those objectives. Also, the urban nodes look at measures from the city perspective rather from the TEN-T perspective, and on the local level, the packaging of measures is also very important in order to reach a high level, the high level objectives. So it's the combination of infrastructure measures together with soft measures and other policies, which forms a package, and these are more important than just single measures. But nevertheless, the urban nodes are becoming much more aware of their nodal function, and are actually and are currently also considering measures and take into account TEN-T corridor planning through the further development of intermodal hubs which connect the TEN-T elements. Improvement of rail infrastructure is a huge issue, and also the implementation of ITS, and also the enhancement of capacity, especially in public transport service, but also for walking and cycling, in order to provide capacity also to other modes. What is the current state of integrated planning methodologies? So not all urban nodes, at least of those we have worked, have gone through an SUMP process. According to the application of assessment tools, and also of the assessment tool which has been developed in the study, the stakeholders considered the methodology and the multi-stakeholder process as very helpful and useful. And the assessment tool can either help to prioritize measures or to evaluate an existing list of measures. I would like to introduce a best practice example. We have worked together with the city of Helsinki, and it's really worthwhile to have a closer look on the city and on the planning process of the Helsinki Region Transport System Plan, which has been developed in 2015. And what we found there is a very strong cooperation process between 14 municipalities in the Helsinki region, and also an agreement between the government and the Helsinki region. So the government is actually integrated in the planning process. Another, and the last key finding is about the knowledge transfer. And what we found out is that a clear strategy for exchange and knowledge transfer from one node to the other is currently lacking. There is a potential for replication. Also, if we found out that the diversity of urban nodes is really large, but there are good practices available, and also urban nodes are really interested to share those best practices. But there are activities going on to have a dialogue, as we see that the urban node concept is being integrated for the first time at the TEN-T event, at the TEN-T days. Coming to the recommendations from our side for the TEN-T and the urban nodes.
Can I stop you again, Susanna, just before we get to the recommendations? We'll just step back one. I'd like to ask another question to the participants, and that is simply, so looking at these key findings that you've identified within the project and the study, not a poll at this time, but just a raise your hand question. So those of you who are from the urban nodes, the question is, do the key findings as described by Susanna from the project, do those reflect your experience in your own cities? So we'd just like you to raise your hands. You've got the raise your hand function there. I'll give you a minute to do that. Hannah, can you count the hands for us?
Sure, although at the moment we've got no hands raised.
Uh-oh. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I'm sorry, we'd be very curious to know what the experience is from the cities then based on this.
Oh, we
Okay.
have one hand.
Okay, so there's some agreement. So, okay, no, the question is, so either they're not listening, or the other option is they don't agree. So I've asked the question, do you agree? Put your hand up. If you disagree, what I would then like to ask you is, in the question box, I would like an answer then. So if you have disagreements or comments or something, if you see something questionable in this, can you just take a moment and just a couple of words in the question box to write down what your experience is if it's different. Okay, I'd just like some input from those who are listening. So at this point, it seems that only one person agrees with the key findings. I'm assuming or hoping there might be some more, but if you have different experience, then just to write a couple of words in the question box, and we'll come back to those in a minute.
We have a few agreements in the comments saying I've agreed for years, for example.
Okay. It's good to know that it does, I mean, what you've come up with then sort of reflects what's going on in the cities, apparently. We'll leave this open. If anybody would like to add any more comments to this, we'll come back to it at the end of Susanna's session. So we've just got the recommendations, I think, and then, okay, we'll turn it back over to you, Susanna. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The recommendations which we draw on the basis of our key findings, I would like to summarize, and we recommend to initiate a systematic exchange on effective measures and projects. We should, the existing indicator and assessment frameworks to assess the efficiency of urban nodes should be updated in order to have an appropriate assessment. Also, there should be a deeper integration of the TEN-T perspective into the urban regional policy making, but also vice versa. Corridor-specific development of technology deployment and policy implementation should be coordinated, and there should be a mutual awareness should be raised of the TEN-T dimension among urban stakeholders, and in order to increase also the understanding of urban mobility framework and policy requirement within the TEN-T community. And we think that the key concept should be integration, which should be also facilitated to further develop the urban dimension of the TEN-T. I would like also to raise your attention to our online course for the urban nodes, where you can find all interesting outputs of the project, and it's available on the Mobility Academy. And maybe we have also the possibility to take a short look into the Mobility Academy, what is available there. So thank you very much for your attention. I think it's on time.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Susanna, very much. I would like to take a couple of minutes now. If there are questions for Susanna, feel free to either type your questions and we'll take them that way, or raise your hand if you'd like to, and we can unmute you so that you can participate in the conversation more easily. And otherwise, Hannah, do you have anything there?
We've got a few questions, or one question came in during the presentation, and it was whether the 88 main nodes are too global, remarking that many secondary regions which later on got high-speed stops, for example, Reggio Emilia, aren't considered. So the question being whether these nodes are too global. I guess if clarification is needed, we can always invite the person who asked the question to clarify.
Mm-hmm. I think there are other nodes which are on the comprehensive network. So it's, I think, not only a part of the network, and there might be also very important nodes also on the comprehensive network. And to be honest, we only concentrated on the 88.
Do you know how those 88 were selected as the coordinates?
There is a methodology in order to define the urban nodes, and generally there is a list that, for example, all capital cities are urban nodes, and cities above 1 million are urban nodes. So there is a very clear definition and methodology which has been developed.
Okay. I hope that answered the question. Are there any more out there, Hannah?
One question, is it possible to define the KPIs for all 88 nodes to compare the success of the actions?
I think this will be presented with Jan's presentation.
Okay, so we'll leave that question.
So that's probably a good segue then into the next presentation.
Okay, then if we have no other questions, we'll turn the screen over to Jan Kiel. And I think it should be moving over. You should see Jan's presentation coming up, and he'll be taking over now.
So are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Okay then, thanks for the introduction and the previous presentation. I will go on with the assessment of transport policy measures and the methodology that we developed. My name is Jan Kiel. I'm transport modeling expert at Pantea, and I developed this methodology together with some colleagues. The content of my presentation will be as follows. First of all, I will give some background of the appraisal methodology. Then I will present the methodology itself, and finally I will draw some conclusions. So the purpose of the methodology, Suzanne already presented. The urban nodes are at the intersection of TEN-T infrastructure and urban infrastructure. And the TEN-T infrastructure mostly concerns hardcore infrastructure measures which have an impact on urban policy objectives. The other way around is also the case. The urban infrastructure measures or the transport policy measures at urban level may impact the TEN-T objectives. So there is a need for a dedicated methodology to identify cost-effective measures, to measure or rate the cost-effective measures, and to predict the impact on the transport systems. Now, why actually a new methodology? Actually, we are looking at a variety of perspectives and stakeholders. For the urban policymakers, TEN-T is out of their scope actually. It's Brussels, and it has less to do with their urban environment. On the other hand, for TEN-T policymakers, urban nodes are often just a dot on the map. Also, there's a variety of measures, not only the hardcore infrastructure measures, but also smaller measures, which may concern, for example, comfort in public transport or timetables. There's also the existence of different and sometimes conflicting policy objectives on both the TEN-T level as on the urban node level. These concern in general accessibility, safety, environment, quality, and interaction between the measures. I will explain these later on. Also, there's the existence of different budgets on TEN-T level, but also on urban level. And, well, we only can spend the budget once, and we need to take care that the right measures are being taken. Now, a cost-benefit analysis has as a drawback that it does not include all effects. It only includes the monetized effects, and soft factors and sometimes also safety and environment are left out because they cannot be quantified. So what we developed is a methodology that combines the cost-benefit analysis with a multi-criteria analysis, and this allows to incorporate more objectives. It takes all perspectives into account, both from TEN-T level as from urban level, and if you apply this methodology, then you may need different stakeholders. It's not only governments, but also industry, citizens, and other that might be included as a stakeholder. And also, you might need a variety of objectives and perspectives. And this makes the result in the end more robust. When developing the methodology, we came across the fact that stakeholders wish as much for as much simplicity as possible without sacrificing the quality of the outcomes. And I will show you later on that we may have succeeded in this. And finally, the methodology needs to integrate all objectives. So it's not only about the transport system and the accessibility, but also we take into account environment, safety, and quality. Now, the resulting methodology, and I will show you in a minute, is a simple methodology which is tested in different locations in Europe. It's understood, and it's also embraced by different types of stakeholders. The methodology is able to generate cost-effective policy measures and policy packages. Now, the framework of the methodology is as follows, and this is maybe a bit of a complex picture, but let me explain. First of all, we have a template to fill in the policy perspectives, both on urban level, on regional level, and on TEN-T level. And this gives you high-level objectives concerning accessibility, concerning safety, environment, quality of life, economy, etc. Secondly, it will give you some operational objectives. If they do not exist, then you have to define them. And one of the sources could be the assessment studies per node that we drafted. After the operational objectives have been defined, one could prepare a workshop and show the inputs to the stakeholders and maybe also ask them to fill in templates that are available in the Excel sheet that I will show you later on. In the workshop, and we used in the workshop also an electronic discussion system. In the workshop, the stakeholders will go through all the objectives and discuss them, and this will lead finally to a consensus on the output, which is ranking the policy measures or ranking the policy packages. Now, as I said before, we see in general 5 policy objectives. 4 firm policy objectives, while the last one is more the interaction between the policy objectives, but these concern accessibility, safety, environment, quality, and interaction. Now, when I go to the definition of these, accessibility in fact refers to the ease of reaching destinations expressed in travel time, travel costs, and or travel distances for different modes. So any policy measure that eases reaching destinations will be preferred over other policy measures, for example. Concerning environment, it is the way the urban environment is influenced by air pollution and or noise due to different policy measures. And concerning air pollution, one might think of CO2 emissions. Looking at CO2 safety, this concerns casualties, fatalities, injuries, and material damage. It's often quantified, but in some cases we also came across some monetizations for these. Quality concerns the soft factors. That's where the soft factors enter the methodology, and this concerns measures like improving the image of a city, improving the comfort in public transport, the social cohesion of an urban node, barriers of infrastructure, etc. These objectives are often difficult or not at all cannot be quantified. And last but not least, interaction. And interaction is the way the transport policy objectives or transport policy measures relate to other measures. And in fact, the question is whether a policy objective or a policy measure strengthens or weakens another measure or objective. As an example, for the operational objectives, when looking at accessibility, one might use passenger kilometers or ton kilometers. There's more, of course, but these are just examples. When looking at safety, one might look at fatal and serious accidents. Concerning environment, one might look at the reduction of CO2 and NOx emissions. And when looking at quality, one might look at the comfort in public transport or the image of the city. And the interaction, as I said before, this is the positive or negative relation between a measure and different other policy measures.
Jan,
yes?
Can I interrupt you briefly before you go on? Before you get into the approach, I would like to ask another question of our participants, if that's okay. We have another poll question. Could you just step back to the previous? Okay, that's okay. The question is about the 5 objectives or the themes that you've identified, and I would just like to ask the participants what their experience is or what their feeling is from their perspective about where the biggest challenge is. So from these 5 that you've identified. So if we could get you to fill your responses in, and Hannah, you can report on how things are coming in.
Yeah, the votes are coming in. We've got about half of the participants having voted so far. If you could just take a moment to let us know which of the objectives. Okay, I'll close the poll now. And as you can see by the results, it's not a totally even split, but we've got a range of 11% as the lowest for safety to 44% environment as the highest. With everyone has voted for at least every aspect has at least one vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jan, any surprises for you in that?
Well, I'm a bit surprised about environment that this one is scores quite high. But yeah, on the other hand, I can understand it. It's at urban level more important than on European level.
Interesting, yeah.
But actually, well, if one would ask me, I would have said accessibility would score highest.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, we'll let you go on. Thanks, Jan.
Okay, you're welcome. Turning to the methodology, we developed a stepwise approach, and in 9 steps. In the first step, we determined the interaction between the different measures. In the second step, we determined the benefits and costs of measures. In the third step, we turn to the other quantifiable measures. In the fourth step, we turn to the qualitative effects. And then in the fifth step, we rank the measures. In the sixth step, we decide on the weights that we need to use. And in the seventh step, we perform a multi-criteria analysis In the 8th step, we perform a sensitivity analysis, and in the 9th step, we will discuss and optimize the packages. Now, we'll explain these different steps in the next slides. First of all, the interaction. Different policy measures relate to each other, and one might see that in some cases policy measures weaken, and in some cases they strengthen each other. It is a high-level assessment without using transport models, but actually rather looking at expert views. And the results are expressed in just one score between two measures, and these can be very strong on positive or negative interaction, or just strong positive negative interaction, or just some interaction or no interaction at all. In the Rotterdam case, we had 5 main policy measures, and well, here we see the interaction matrix. It's not completely in an equilibrium. As you can see, some cases have an influence upon the other policy measure, while the other way around is not the case. So this gives us a relative score, and well, as can be seen, the RDH airport, the Rotterdam-The Hague airport, and the A13, A16 motorway score best with 10 points, while the subway Hoekselijn scores least with 3 points. In the second step, we turn to the costs and the benefits. And the costs and the benefits are actually related to, well, the cost-benefit analysis itself. The costs being the costs of the investment, but also of the maintenance and depreciation, and the benefits being the different policy objectives concerning accessibility, environment, safety, quality, and interaction. The purpose is to monetize the measures as much as possible and to include all costs and benefits. As we know, it often requires a cost-benefit analysis or other types of economic assessments. But if not available, then this methodology also allows a more qualitative way based upon expert views. Why is this? This is the case because in the policy-making process, there's not always data available. So when we start in a policy-making process, then probably there's no cost and benefit monetized at all. So then in that case, we need to use a qualitative way. At the end, however, of the policy-making process, one would expect that costs and benefits are available in quantifiable ways, and then we can use the cost-benefit analysis in a proper way. Now here's again the example of the Rotterdam case, and as you can see, we scored the total investment costs in a qualitative way. So ranking from very low costs to very high costs. And as can be seen, the A13, A16 scores least because the costs are very high, while the Rotterdam-The Hague airport scores best because the costs are fairly low. Again, these are expert views. It is of course possible later on to show the real costs of investment and then change the results a little bit. The relative score is based upon a ranking between 1 point and 10 points, and well, when using the euro figures, then it shouldn't change that much in the end. For accessibility, we did the same. So we looked at accessibility, and we scored the different projects from very low to very high on accessibility. And as can be seen, the A13 A16 scores quite high. It's a connection between two motorways that fills a gap, and well, that's why it scores 10 points, while the Rotterdam-The Hague airport scores least. Again, if there is information on the benefits of accessibility, then you could fill them in as well. There's also other quantifications possible. One needs to identify the non-monetizable effects as much as possible to make an objective comparison possible. And this needs a thorough assessment of available studies, and it could be supplemented with interviews and expert views. These sometimes may concern environment and safety. Especially concerning safety, some people do not think it's ethical to attach euros to fatality. So then, in that case, one could leave it like that and just concentrate on the fatalities. It's also, of course, possible to express this for environment in terms of tons of CO2 or NOx. So here's an example for the environmental benefits. And in the Rotterdam case, these were the scores. We scored them in a qualitative way again, from, well, bad environmental benefits to very good environmental benefits. As can be seen, the A13, A16 scores least. It's a missing link, and we expected a lot of extra traffic on this missing link, which would cause, well, a lot of pollution for those living near the new road. On the other hand, the public transport subway Hoekse scores best. It's seen as a relative good solution for improving the environment. Again, if there's quantifiable information available, then these could be put in the methodology and used in the methodology as well. Like, for example, the CO2 emissions expressed in tons. For safety, the Rotterdam case saw these as the safety benefits. They are fairly small. Some are neutral and some are, well, scored a bit better than neutral, but not that much. In the fourth step, we look at the quality aspects, and as I mentioned before, these concern barriers, comfort, social cohesion, and any other aspects that are hard to quantify. We rank those measures, and they can be regarded, when do this with different stakeholders, as an intersubjective exercise. In the Rotterdam case, we had about 10 stakeholders in our workshop, and they scored the different projects from double- to double+. Based upon these double- and these double+, we ranked the projects from 1 to 10, which is small or bad or large or good. Now here's an example of the qualitative aspects in the Rotterdam case. As can be seen, the Rotterdam-The Hague Airport scores best in this case, while the A13, A16 scores least. And this one is based upon the pluses and minuses that were given by the different stakeholders. Now in the fifth step, we matched the scores. The scores of the measures of the different policy objectives are made comparable. All the scores range from 1 to 10, and per objective a 1 is lowest and a 10 is highest. And in between, everything is based on, well, a ratio related to the lowest and the highest score. The same measuring stick for all the objectives, and the objectives can be compared. Now here's an example of matching the scores. Here we put all scores together, and as can be seen, the A13, A16 scores least, while the subway Hoekse scores best, based upon the different policy objectives and based upon the costs. The costs are expressed right at the beginning, while the benefits concern the other 5 aspects. Oops. The 6th step, in the 6th step we choose the weights, and by applying the weights the objectives can be further integrated or added. These weights are determined by or need to be agreed upon by the stakeholders. In the Rotterdam case, we ask the stakeholders to give weights to all the aspects, and so they did. And one needs to keep in mind that these weights can differ per region or per stakeholder and even per objective or per measure. The assessment methodology is in that sense very flexible. One remark, the weights always add up to 100%. Now here's an example. These are the average weights that the stakeholders gave to the different aspects. And what may surprise is that the costs only weigh up to 22 or 22%, while the other, the benefits for that they add up to almost 80%. As can be seen, accessibility scores 30 points, and safety and environment score both 13 points. Quality scores a bit higher with 16 points, and interaction is about 5 points. Now in the 7th step we perform the multi-criteria analysis, and this step automatically follows from the previous ones, including the application of the weights. The assessment model we used is flexible, and it allows for quick adjustments, which I will show you in a minute. So after performing the multi-criteria analysis, we see the next picture, and it shows that the subway Hoekse line is, well, the best policy option, while the A13, A16 scores least. And in between there is the green port, the Rotterdam The Hague Airport, and the A15, which is also a motorway. In the 8th step, we performed a sensitivity analysis, and this can be done for different packages and measures, and well, in fact the sensitivity is tested. We tested different aspects, like for example what happens if different weights are chosen, or what different packages or measures can be combined, and what if there is a cap on the available budgets. Now in the Rotterdam The Hague we played around with weights. These are the original outcomes from the stakeholders, but in this case we looked at different weights. We increased the costs weight, and we decreased the benefit weights, and well, we made costs more important, like 40 points or 40%, and the others became less important. And this gives some new results, and as can be seen, the results are fairly robust. The subway Hoekse line is still scoring the best, while the A13, A16 scores least. On the other hand, something has happened. The Rotterdam The Hague Airport and the A15 swapped places. So it does have some effect, and especially if the list of measures is much longer, then it will certainly have effect. But looking at the policy measure that scores least and the policy measure that scores best, nothing happened at all. Based upon these results, a discussion took place. We discussed the various measures in this case, and the discussion on the results should lead to an agreement on which policy package or which policy measures suits the stakeholders best. If an agreement cannot be reached, then the process could be repeated, but our experience is that up to now, most stakeholders, well, sort of had a consensus on the list of policy measures. Of course, this does not mean that the decisions in the end will match with the list of ranked policy measures, but it helps to make a decision. It supports a policy decision. One needs to keep in mind that the measures in itself are not bad, but when they rank low, but compared to others, they score less well. So the essence of the methodology, it is an approach for different problems at different geographical levels, and it integrates different impacts that can be shown both monetized and non-monetized. And the approach is both qualitative and quantitative. In the beginning of the policy making process, it will probably be more qualitative, while in the end it will be probably more quantitative. It weighs packages with different types of measures, or it is able to weigh different types of measures, and it weighs different policy objectives for benefits such as accessibility, environment, safety, quality, and interaction between the measures. The lessons that we learned from our cases is that the method offers what the method offers is different from what policymakers are used to. Even if we are at the beginning of a policy making process, we can use this method. And it can be used fairly quickly. In a couple of days we have results. While if we do extensive cost-benefit analysis, then it will probably take months to reach some results. Comparing infrastructure options is also possible. So we looked at different projects, but we also can look at just one project, like the A13, A16 in our example, and look at different variants of the layout of this motorway. It will also help to make up the minds of the policymakers. Inputs are not always available or available in required formats, so it might take some time to prepare the results, the input for the methodology, and this is especially the case at the end of the policy-making process when different types of results are available, but not in the required format. We also learned that electronic discussion tools help to structure the discussions and to focus upon those aspects that the stakeholders disagree upon. The electronic discussion tools have as advantage that all stakeholders have a similar amount of speaking time, and it also has as an advantage that it is really focused upon those issues that are controversial. The results of the methodology is a prioritization and not a judgment. As I said before, policy measures are not bad, but they score less well than others when comparing them. The explanation of the method and measures should be shown before the methodology is used. The stakeholders should know all about method, but also about the policy measures in order to make good judgments. The stakeholders, they need to be chosen from a wide audience, not only governments, but preferably also industry or citizens or other organizations. And the outcome of the method, as we tested it, is fairly robust. It is usually not sensitive to different weights. And last but not least, we need to use the methods. So summarizing, the method takes into account soft measures by putting them in the policy objective quality. It sort of takes wish lists into account. It is based upon cost-benefit analysis and a multi-criteria analysis. The method is fairly simple and can be used fairly quickly. It does not necessarily lead to the most optimal cost-benefit analysis. That is something that needs to be kept in mind. But on the other hand, it is less rigid than a cost-benefit analysis, as it takes into account more than just the costs and benefits of policy measures, but also qualitative aspects. This finishes my presentations. I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jan. I would also like to take this opportunity to ask a question of the audience with regard to your presentation, if that's all right. And my question, or I'll say, also feel free to ask, either put your hand up or write some questions to Jan if you would like to, but my question to the audience is, do you see this sort of this high-level approach as useful for you in your nodes, in your cities, for assessing the cost effectiveness of packages of measures? So asking people's inputs or their response to what you presented, do you see this as something that you can imagine using? It would be valuable for you in your city. We'll do this maybe with a hand raise again. If you can put your hand up if you agree.
We have a few hands going up.
Okay. And of course, we always have the follow-up question. If you did not put your hand up, we'd love to have any comments or points that you'd like to make, just written in the question box, what you would find as concerning, or what might not work, or what you think would be better perhaps in your city. So anything that you'd like to add. If you don't put your hand up, then we'd like to know why you didn't put your hand up. We'd ask you to write a few comments, if that's okay. Give you a moment to do that. And meanwhile, Hannah, do we have any other questions from the audience during the presentation for Jan?
You know, the only questions that came up during the presentation were quite shortly thereafter addressed in the presentation, so there's nothing outstanding. But maybe if anyone has any questions now, they can raise their hand and be unmuted, or can type it in the box. A few people did ask if they can receive the PowerPoint file of the presentation, and as Bonnie mentioned, this the whole webinar recording will be available, and maybe you can just confirm that the file would also be, whether the file would be available.
The PowerPoint presentations will be available together with two PowerPoint presentations, which was also provided by by DG Move. Yeah.
Okay.
So 4 presentations, actually 2 which were given and 2 from,
and some additional information from the European Commission.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
And we do have a raised hand, so if there's time, I could unmute. Is there time for this? All right.
Yes. Go ahead.
I think you need to do that. Actually, I don't have this function.
Just a minute. And whose hand was it? I'll have to go searching for it.
Robert Stussy.
Ah, Robert. Then, just a moment. You're at the bottom of the list. Okay. Robert, I'm having trouble unmuting you. I'm sorry. Can I ask you to write your question? He wrote it already.
Yeah, I think about the selection of the stakeholders.
Hannah, I think you overlooked one question here. I can see it now. The question to Jan was, how were the stakeholders or the experts chosen to weigh the evaluation criteria?
In this case, we chose stakeholders from the case study area, which concerned representatives of transport operators and shippers, the Port Authority of Rotterdam, the Municipality of Rotterdam and The Hague, and Rijkswaterstaat, which is our national road authority. These are a few examples of stakeholders that have been chosen, but it is usually a broad list of stakeholders that are directly involved in the work that has been presented. So people who know all about the subway, or people who know all about the A13, A16. And based upon their views, their expert views, these methodology was carried out.
And does an individual expert and the ministry have the same weight, or when they give weight to factors?
In this case, everyone had the same weight. Of course, it is possible to attach different weights to government and to industry or citizens, but we did not do so. But if you would like to, then this should be agreed upon right at the start when using or applying the methodology.
Mm-hmm. All right, and another question that has just come in is how can the method be included in an SUMP process or similar processes for urban mobility plans?
It can be included, well, it depends upon, as I stated before, it can be included in sums, especially, in sums because the methodology is able to rank different types of policy measures. So even policy measures concerning parking, for example, parking of cars, but also of bikes, compared to, making new roads. It can be used for that. And depending upon where you are in the process, if you need to start a SUMP, then you could perfectly use it to rank a large list of policy measures. It does not necessarily have to be 5, it can also be 100. Of course, this would require a bit more time to prepare, but still it is possible to use it for a long list of policy measures as well. Of course, this requires some input and also some preparations for the stakeholders, as they need to know what they are judging.
Thank you. Hannah, any more questions out there?
No.
Okay. Then I'll say if we don't have any more questions, I will just thank Jan very much for your presentation and Susanna also for yours. And as noted, the presentations will be made available to all of you. I've put the screen back here as well with regard to the Mobility Academy and the online course. So if anybody would like to follow up on that, you can see the Excel sheet that's used, as well as sort of be spoken through or worked through the methodology that was used within the project. So there's more information there. We will also have a quick follow-up questionnaire for all of you at the end of this, which will be sent to you automatically after you sign off. And we would appreciate your feedback. So if you have any comments or questions or feedback that you would like to provide us with regard to this webinar, we'd appreciate that. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much to everybody and have a lovely Thursday afternoon. Goodbye.